So my name is Marciante. I'm a Senior Director of Product Management, and one of the areas of my responsibility is SmartView for Office. And with me is Shaji Puthanvidal. He is the Development Director of SmartView, so he's been running the development team on SmartView, and we'll be kind of co-presenting on this. I'll be walking through slides. He'll add in some commentary as well, and then we'll also have some demos interspersed within this presentation as well. So, as you expect with an Oracle presentation, we're going to be talking about some futures, some areas that we're going to with SmartView. So just so you're aware of those, they're active R&D things we're doing, but when they manifest themselves in product available for you to download and work with, you know, that the timing and those things we could talk about, but that's our general direction that we'll cover. So first of all, from an introduction perspective, does anybody in here not know what SmartView is? Is it new to somebody? Good, because that just moves me past about 5 slides. So before I do that though, how many use SmartView with on-premises applications, EPM apps? Lots of hands. Okay. How many are using it with the cloud apps? Okay. How many with cloud ERP? The cloud ERP. And then lastly, how many are using it with Essbase? Either on-prem or cloud. Okay. Good set of hands going up there. That's perfect. So hopefully we'll have something for everybody in here. So one of the things that we do talk about now is, especially, how many of you still rue the day the old add-in no longer shipped? How about AppMan, Application Manager? Oh yeah, there you go. I know I catch a couple there. Yeah. So SmartView, as you know, it is our Essbase add-in now. People love it, or you know, they like the simplicity of the older add-in. You know, as we go to the cloud, or if you start to adopt, you know, OAC or the Oracle Analytics Cloud with Essbase within there, you know, the old add-in talked through TCP/IP, not cloud friendly, certainly not something you'd want to be using over the wire. So SmartView, Shaji will be addressing kind of this, you know, the ribbon's kind of complex, I want to customize it, I don't like the submit button right next to the refresh, all those other things we could talk about in there, you know, what it does there, but it is our, you know, main add-in that really allows you to traverse the whole EPM, on-prem, in the cloud, cloud ERP, and even some other special things like with eBiz, there is a predictive planning or whatever they call it with eBiz as well. So, you know, SmartView is kind of goes across that, and it also works across all of Office, right? And so, from a platform support, we just wanted to cover a few things up front here, because even internally, we always get our, you know, people ask questions from our field and other things because of, does it support Office 365? Well, it does, because Office 365 is kind of a marketing, it's an addition that Microsoft sells, but we support the additions, obviously, that include the client installable components of Office. So if somebody says, I have Office 365, if you actually look under it, it's basically Office 16. 2016 currently is the released copy of Office 365. So we currently work on Essbase clients. We'll talk about that, where we're going for cloud support for Office 365 in the web, which would be some cool. Shaji will showcase some of that cross-platform functionality. Windows 7 through 10. So in general, we try to support the versions that Microsoft supports. So if you still have XP running around, you know, we're not supporting XP anymore, but we do go back to Office 2007. So depending on the version of Office you're on, some things may or may not look a little bit different because Microsoft is there. I'm kind of drifting in and out here. Update their platform from time to time and how SmartView behaves. And so when we talk about tips and tricks, that's why sometimes somebody will say, oh, in Office 2016 I get flashing, I don't see it on 2013. If you talk to folks like Tim Toe or others that also do things in the Office environment, every new release of Office kind of has a different programmatic interface in there. They change things, they get new settings in the registry, and so we're constantly working through that and making sure that we can have this seamless experience across all editions in there. So, you know, over the years we've done some things just to make sure we get to that single installer, so whether you're running 64-bit Office or 32. But As you would expect, one of the things that we really do is really want to focus, and we'll talk more about some performance testing here, is really start to make sure that we can be very efficient, even with SmartView, retrieving large grids, large amounts of data, because as Office went from 64,000 rows up to 1 million rows or whatever the numbers used to be, right away customers want to start pushing the limits on that. They drill to the bottom of a huge dimension and then they bring back a ton of data, and we want to make sure we can do that. Now from a SmartView perspective, our world is changing fast. The cloud is updating regularly. You see new updates coming in the cloud for new functionalities or new applications that we've been delivering, or functionality like financial consolidation and close. And then we need to support things like supplemental data manager there and other pieces. So we update SmartView on a somewhat regular basis. And we also have an extension framework in there that we'll talk about. The extension framework allows us to start to separate out programmatic or specific source functionality from just core SmartView. So SmartView, when you install it, that's core SmartView. And if you use the FR, Financial Reports extension, if you use the Journals module, Journals functionality in HFM, things like that, those are extensions that can be updated individually that don't really require a big install of SmartView or a refresh of SmartView. However, we do encourage that when you can get into the cycle with your IT organization or your desktop support, that you as much as possible try to stay current on SmartView, because we're always not only enhancing and doing things in there as we get feedback on it, but we're constantly making performance updates and other things there as well. Okay? Okay. So a couple of things here. Why don't you talk through the security stuff on here?
That's right. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, just pull it forward close to you.
So SmartView supports most of the authentication schemes out there.
Yeah. Now do it. Now do it. You're on. You're on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Okay. SmartView does support pretty much most of the authentication schemes out there. Okay. Maybe it's better. Thank you. So one of the ways that we are achieving that is by hosting that in a browser control. So if your single sign-on application works on a browser, then it's more than 90%, or even higher number than that, it's going to work within SmartView also. Internally, we are using what we call it as WinINet, and host the whole sign-on process within an IE control. So it takes you through the if there is multi-factor authentication, it handles it. If you have a federated single sign-on, it does handle it. We have customers who are using Kerberos. We have customers using certificate-based authentication, etc. All these are automatically supported, just the fact that we are using the browser control behind the scenes. So most of the single sign-on mechanism should just work. And go to the last point, we are adding an additional functionality in the upcoming release where in certain cases, we would be able to single sign-on across Office also. You have Excel, now you are moving from Excel to Word, it won't prompt you again to provide the credentials. So that is something that we are adding in our, for the cloud login. It used to work for your on-prem situations, but we are extending that to the cloud world also.
Yeah, and we'll do a demo on that. The interesting thing with our cloud and the way our security mechanism works in the cloud, Office is separate applications, so being able to share that token across to support the single sign-on wasn't an inherent thing there. In a way, it was almost like starting an IE and then expecting, because you signed in an IE, that if I start Firefox, I would automatically be logged in, right? So it treats them as two separate things, but we've done some work there to really do some items there. So we talked a bit about extensions. So just again, to give you an idea of what we're doing with extensions, this again helps us separate out from core SmartView so that you don't have to download this massive client every time. These extensions can just be auto-updated. You can connect to them. You can update them. So an example of one is for enterprise performance reporting. Our whole interaction with EPRCS to check out documents, to update them, to check them in, to review, to go through and do all that activity, that's just an extension. So once you connect to the service, that extension enables, and then you start to work what that service provides directly within there. As I mentioned, financial reports has an extension in there. We also see them for Oracle, OBIEE, BICS as part of the OAC is there as well. And then we mentioned eBiz as well. So, many extensions that are there that allow us to continue to extend items, extend functionality in there to interact with. And you certainly see some for the on-prem with SDM, Financial Close Manager, and those pieces, disclosure management, et cetera. Okay, so that's kind of just gives a little bit of a framework around it, but let's really kind of jump into some specific things about what we've done over the last year. So, as we mentioned, performance is always something that we do, and we're going to talk through a couple of items in here. From a performance perspective, this chart's kind of a little confusing to me because it looks like it's actually taking us longer, but the left axis over here is really size of grids, number of cells, things that we're working with. So it's really increasing that size. So just from the standpoint of getting at data, obviously if we go to a 10 by 10 grid, that's 100 cells, too small to measure, it doesn't matter. Our oldie but goodie the old Essbase Classic add-in is over on the end. PS2 was our terminal release for that offering, but you see that we still go off and we continue to compare it to it and make sure how we're doing. And then to the left, 520 is kind of in the middle. That's where a lot of customers are at with SmartView. And then 710.710 is our most recent release. So you can see how we've continued to make enhancements in the performance. And certainly when we get down to this bottom one of 820,000 cells. So I formatted the one for Sunday. I didn't do the one here with commas to make sure that's more readable. But basically going and getting 820,000 cells of data. The old add-in was almost 50% slower than SmartView at getting data, right? So that's, as we mentioned, that's just an area that we want to make sure people are aware of. From a performance perspective, from getting large amounts of data, we continue to optimize this and make sure that we're very efficient, even when we're going through like HTTP, HTTPS, where you have to do a little bit more overhead to get that data and render it than we did through old TCP/IP. So, yes.
Those are all assumed ad hoc. Are you working on it?
That is correct.
The class formulas?
No, they're actually, so this test was done with...
So the question was, this is just ad hoc, just pulling data, but your question was about the formulas. In the sheet or formulas coming from the server side?
Formulas from the sheet, like the equal HS get vowels?
Yep. Yeah.
No, this is a purely grid retrievals. And for this test, in both cases, we did turn off formula preservation and formula fill as well. Just to make...
So against HFM, I use a lot of equal HS get vowels.
Yeah, we're going to talk on the... Yeah, we're going to talk in the tips and tricks and kind of talk about HS get vals versus ad hoc forms, things like that. So, we will talk through that. Yeah. So, kind of what we'll do is kind of cover each of these little releases in here. So depending on what version you're on, we'll kind of cover what's there and you'll see what's more recently available through this. As we mentioned, as much as you can, we do recommend that you stay as current as possible with that. So in our .600 release.
Just to add to that, one of the things what we, like Al was mentioning previously, we release at least 3 to 4 times a year. And we make it a point to include as many issues reported by the customers into the next release as possible. The only criteria we do not include or we could not include is that it's destabilizing the code or it came at the very end of the release where we started to close down. In those cases, it gets pushed to the next release. That is one factor. Second one I want to bring up here is that we are working on Microsoft code. So they are making constant changes to the code. So if there are issues that come across in those integration or within the Office code, we do have tie-up with Microsoft. Generally, if we push a request for help from them, we get within few hours of response time from them. And if they go through their code and we provide them our PDB files and they debug it, and if that appears to be an issue with them, they provide a patch right away, or it's rolled into one of your monthly patches, right? So what I recommend in those cases that I would like you to update your Office also. Very likely that the Office has addressed some of those issues. Same thing with SmartView. every release you are getting more and more fixes. Any bug fixes, enhancement request, or features included in a prior release is automatically rolled into the new one. We are also making sure that we run through the automation. We certified for backward compatibility. We are also going through UI automation, manual testing, API testing to make sure that we do not get or slip a regression into it. If there is any regression that appears, then we jump on it to address it right away. This is just to build confidence that you should feel comfortable to move to a later version so that you get all these benefits from that.
Yeah, and one of the things when Shaji, when we talk about a bit about Office 365 and supporting on the web and other things, we know that will make it much easier to roll out and update to your organization. So we do recognize that it's desktop software, that a lot of desktops are locked down. There's concerns about updating, that. We do know on the cloud, because we do those updates, we make sure we notify in advance so customers can prepare for it. As Shaji mentioned, we do test to make sure that even if we're exposing something in SmartView for a new feature, the existing SmartView and functionality should work, continue to do what it did with a service, regardless of whether you upgrade. But you may or may not get to take advantage of that new functionality, which is what you'd expect. If you stay with an older client, you might not be able to take advantage of the functionality. And the last thing, just to reinforce that, is even with our cloud ERP, which moves a little bit slower in their release cycles, the current release of SmartView still supports that. So we have cloud ERP customers that are adopting EPM Cloud, or they're doing other things, and they need to update that client, and we're making sure that it works with all of our supported code lines that are on our support matrix as part of listed in the lifetime support policy. So those are all supported within there. So from a .600, when that one came out, we started to add some additional pieces in there for our cloud support. So for both enterprise planning and budgeting and financial consolidation and close. But we also did some things to really help customers that, hey, I need to interact with this spreadsheet, or I've got SmartView already defined in here, I need to change connection info, or I need to rename ranges. This was a big one where a customer really wanted to rename the ranges that were within the document content panel, content pane, so we added those features within there as well. And then from, you see the other items on the right side that are really for our cloud side. So both planning and budgeting was really getting attribute support, duplicate aliases, and also continue to expand that admin extension they have. So they have the ability to administer some of the application directly through SmartView, and we added some functionality there to get additional attributes. From an enterprise performance reporting standpoint, we rely on SmartView a lot because we use the Office environment for authoring content, and so we're always expanding that piece there. So if you're interested in kind of seeing all the cool stuff around SmartView with EPRCS, I have a session on that tomorrow at, I believe, 3 o'clock, somewhere in there, and I'll be in this room. So definitely, we could go through those items. When we rolled into 6.10, one of the things we wanted to do is really enhance, again, a little bit on the cloud, we wanted to enhance the interaction you can do on a form, right? So within a row, on the member names, I can drop down or provide a list box there. So a user working with an ad hoc form can actually go in and start to change the members and get that nice member pick there. They could search for a member, do other things within that drop down. And so that's controllable by the form designer on the server. They specify whether this form can have drop downs when it's rendered in SmartView. And if that item is checked, then when they render that form and they interact with it, you'll see drop downs within there, and then you can choose to select members. Provides a lot of flexibility for the form designer. You don't have to design a form for every possible combination or amount of metadata that your different users may need. They can just go ahead and pull the members up as they need them directly in the row without having to throw it up in the POV or something. How many people use VBA in here with SmartView? Okay, great. So we've got a number of items that we're doing within here that you'll see that we've continued to expand the VBA library that you have available to you to write your custom macros and develop your applications within SmartView. So you do have capabilities now to auto-define the range of the grid that you have. So you could have VBA to analyze where the user has data or other things and automatically define that grid. You could submit without refreshing data, so something that we always knew. People distribute a spreadsheet, they get it back, and you just want to send it there. You don't want to refresh it because they're giving you the data to input. So you could actually have that now where you could programmatically provide that. And then from, again, EPM cloud support, we've continued to expand what we do there with embedded content and reference docklets and versioning and other things that we provide within here, as well as a review compare. So, within EPRCS, when you're reviewing a big narrative report, we could actually auto-start the review comparison back into Office so they could see all the little granular changes. This font was changed, this paragraph was changed, this thing, they could see all those strike-throughs and everything else. So we directly integrated there. And also in here, in 620, we did some additional VBAs around setting this single sign-on, listing the applications, databases, other pieces there. Actually, I think I missed this. This is kind of a repeat here, the bottom half. So, I think I forgot to copy over these top 4. So.
Yeah, I think what we added there was you can export a calc script. Yeah, I think it got overwritten. So basically from Essbase, you can export a calc script as a string using a VBA. So that provides you an ability to manipulate this VBA script, then run it again. So we provided 2 VBAs for you. Yeah, that's something we have. Yeah.
The calc script, and then you can go ahead and submit the calc script afterwards. Right, yeah. So if you kind of want to pull in a parameterized one, you want to fill it in based on some data, manipulate that string based on what they have in their sheet. This thing keeps fading in and out, doesn't it? Or is it just me? Yes. Okay. Because I'm not even moving. Okay, we'll try this then. Okay, so as Shaji mentioned, even if you just want to retrieve that parameterized calc and then you want to kind of manipulate it based on the POV or other members they have on there and then submit that, you can do that through the VBA. Okay, and then when we got to 700, people starting to use Chrome in here. I know the current workspace doesn't really work within Chrome, but as we're introducing even for planning on-prem and we start to get those simplified interfaces there, being able to launch SmartView from Chrome. We did it through Firefox, we did it through IE. I will post these slides. I have an older set placeholder that's there. I'm going to post these up on the thing. So if you're taking pictures of them, just know you'll be able to download them from the site as well. And then some other things around again, on the different pieces that we've been doing within here. Okay? The journals, reports, yeah.
Just yet another convenience functionality we added is the ability to insert chart directly into PowerPoint from a planning form.
Right.
So you connect to PowerPoint, connect to your PBCS application or planning application, right-click and insert a chart right in. Then you could format it, save that PowerPoint. That is supported now. Yeah,
that's the second one on the list. So that's available there as well. Okay, no, so this was in 700 that you said was there. You're jumping ahead on me. So there's your get calc script and your get calc script, submit the calc script string. So it was in 700. Shaji was excited about this one, so he jumped ahead on it. So, okay. All right. So, and then for HFM journals, right? So we did a bunch of things within here to list. So if you have HFM and you're using the journals module within here, you can really manage that end to end for the most part through SmartView. So you list your journals, you can open them, you set properties, save them, perform actions, and other things against the journals. Okay? Okay, and as Shaji mentioned, in 701, this is our single sign-on. So this is just going to be a real simple demo, but it's pretty, it's pretty powerful. This is a short video on here. So basically, what we're doing here is we formatted a grid, we connected to a source, and I'm going to go ahead. I'm copying that grid. I'm going to launch Word, and I'm going to paste this into Word. Now, traditionally, it comes in still like it always did to tell you that you need to refresh the data. But traditionally, when it came in, you were going to get challenged to log in again, right? So as you do it, I get the need refresh, but now I could just hit the refresh and I'm not going to get challenged to log in a second time. It'll just go ahead and when I click on the refresh, it'll go get that data. So no, it's not a real pretty looking grid, but you get the idea here. So a lot of people take stuff from Excel into Word or PowerPoint and want to do that refresh and you get that challenge for that login. Now you won't get that, okay? Okay, so that's kind of the year in review. I mean, lots of things in there, lots of features. You know, you see it also a lot in our, on the cloud side, we do a lot of videos and other things that we have up on YouTube where we highlight these new features and talk about them there. So kind of what we're starting to do here is, you know, there's a lot of work going on for, I don't want to even just say PBCS. This is really our EPM cloud platform. So most of the things that we do here translate across. But planning introduced some functionality called valid combinations, for example. So when you define a form or something else, you could, or when you're defining your dimensions, you could actually define the rules at which these dimensions interact, because I might not sell all products to all countries or whatever that may be. So as I'm within a form and I select a product, it'll only give me the valid countries in which we go, that we sell that in, right? So it kind of does that cross-validation. We didn't have that exposed yet on the SmartView side, so we will be adding that into the SmartView side. And then also continuing to create more ease of use features for designing business rules or doing things. From an Essbase standpoint, if you were there on Sunday, you saw Gabby's, or heard Gabby talk about what they're doing with Essbase Cloud, you know, this is a pretty functional item that we're doing here to really help during the development of an Essbase cube. So if you're an admin or you're designing a cube and you're trying to figure out solve orders, you want to make sure your rules are right and other things like what's going on during this calculation, we're exposing a lot of features within there for debugging that, tracing that, walking through that process as you work with it. And to the extent that those features will be exposed to on-prem Essbase, that's really an area for Gabby and the Essbase team to designate when that'll update there. When those features are there, this is already in SmartView, so it would work with it when you're down in that environment as well. So we have those pieces there. And then these integrated EPM business processes are really about how we're bringing our cloud together to allow these seamless business processes that transcend multiple services or things where I might be within consolidation and I need to go do something with planning to update my plan. I could just do that seamlessly. I'm not thinking about connecting to different providers. I'm not thinking about all those things we do today when we got to toggle between different things within SmartView. So from kind of a quick demo of this piece here, this is the Essbase piece. So one of the things here, we're connecting in through OAC into the cloud, and I can go ahead and pull out information here. So this is a bit of the demo with the debugging, and here I'm just kind of trying to create a quick grid in which I'm going to work to understand my solve orders and trace calculations and other items here. So when I come in and I'm walking through this, here you see I'm just doing normal activities. You can see the performance. It's actually coming through pretty good, going against the cloud, so it's not on-prem. It's a cloud-based system we're interacting with. But here I could go ahead and look at the solve order. For this particular member, I have two solve orders. One is for the month and then the quarter, and then also for the margin percent itself. Again, I have to be a designer of the cube to be able to interact here, but directly in here, without having to go to the item or go to the outline and open it up, I could actually manipulate the solve order directly here from within SmartView. I can manipulate that, I could do the query and test and determine that, yeah, I'm getting the value I'm expecting out of here, so I know I'm designing my outline properly. I can also go ahead and issue a calculation and trace that calculation, and it'll tell me whether or not what I'm looking at is even impacted by this calculation. So that's pretty powerful too, because I might be expecting to have a calculation that executes based on what a user's putting in, and I want to know whether that's even available. Another piece of functionality we have here as well, is being able to well, this is doing another trace here, so this is where I'm actually seeing that the calculation I am doing is actually impacting what I'm looking at, and I can go get that information and query it and make sure that, as I'm designing, debugging, putting this together, that everything is working good. And then lastly, one of the nice areas we have is the ability to also come in now and look at an audit, right? So what they have on the Essbase Cloud is the ability to understand all the history around this database, what updates have occurred. So in the bottom right, I'm actually seeing every POV, and I could go ahead and look at and see what the value was changed to. And because that's a POV there, I could actually launch right into that POV, and now I could do some manipulation of it. It's just a grid at that point. So I could drill up, drill down, update data if I have access to do that. Maybe I need to change a value back. But more importantly, I can also go ahead and just take all of this audit out, So here I'm looking at it, I can see what I've got, I could actually bring that all into a sheet. So I click that and it brought all that into me. I see who the user is, when it happened, you know, it's got a cell type there, I see it, I see on the right side, you know, the POV associated with it. I can, you know, this is just using Excel filtering. This is not an ad hoc grid here, but you can use Excel functionality, but more importantly, you could take this, you know, back to your on-premises, you know, load it up in a database if you need to keep it, or if you have something like DVCS or a visualization tool, you could actually use this to plot where are people updating data the most, where's the most volatile part of my cube. So you do have those capabilities in there as well, okay? So we got this question on Sunday too. So I know on planning, everybody says, oh, we want this audit information. So planning is also working on their audit stuff because, of course, we know that Essbase is just a part of what they have. So they are going to be exposing, I know on PVCS they'll be exposing that sooner. And then on-prem, because it isn't a table, you have some capabilities to get some of the information there. They will be, I believe, planning to roll that into on-prem, but that will be coming in the cloud for them to have a similar type of audit to track that. And then that'll be available to all of the cloud applications that sit on the platform. Yes?
So whatever you adjust here, that's the order with that number, get by that.
Yeah, it goes into the outline. Yes. Okay, so, you know, it's a great debugging tool because I'm an old Essbase guy too, and I remember trying to, you know, before you only had to toggle between, you know, 2-pass calc or something and some of those dynamic calcs, but now when you have solve order capability and you're moving away from so many calc scripts, this really helps you tune that database, but more importantly, make sure the data coming out is accurate. So a couple things from a roadmap perspective. You know, as we talked about earlier, this is kind of where we're active doing some R&D stuff. We're going to actually show a couple of items in here. We just talked about most of these items in here just on this previous slide, right? So, you know, we talked about the calc scripts. We talked about all these things on the bottom. You know, the audit, the trace, solve order stuff, and pieces there. So we're going to kind of jump into the next part of the program, what we're currently working on beyond that, right? Because a lot of this items we just went through are really more imminent. Those are out or coming out very shortly. So one of the items is, we're calling it Smart View for Office 365. So a couple of, you know, items here. Office in the cloud, well, the newer versions of Office now, to really support across the platform, across all the deployments of Office, right? So Office runs on Macs, it runs on iPads, it runs on Windows, and it runs in the cloud. Maybe there's another one in there somewhere, but I think those are their main deployments. So, you know, our add-in, the way it's written, can't run in the cloud. It's a different programmatic model. So we're actually going through the effort of re-architecting SmartView to work within that environment. And Shaji will walk through a little bit of this, and then we'll cover a little bit of details here. The key thing to just reinforce what Shaji said is we have a very close relationship with Microsoft that's been pretty good. Because when they first had it there and we started to work with it, they didn't even have a method to intercept the double click, for example, right? In the cloud. I mean, we do that all the time with SmartView, but you couldn't programmatically, with an add-in, intercept that double click and then do what we do, which is do a drill down or a drill out or things like that. So, you know, we really had to go through and work with them. So as we work and we're advancing ours, they're adding more features in so that we can then expose it on our side. So it's been a very good collaborative standpoint from there. Okay? And then we'll walk through a couple of other items here. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to you real quick. I'm just going to unplug because even though we have it up on Office 365, he's just going to demo it. He's going to demo it on a Macintosh. And this is active code because Apple's one of our customers and they use SmartView, but you know, for obvious reasons, they don't want to run it on a Windows machine much longer. And so, but they do run Office, and so Shaji's just going to show real quick of this working on a Macintosh, which really gives you that cross-platform support regardless.
That's right, yeah. So what I'm going to do, this is, yeah, of course, this is a Mac machine. Just make sure
Yep.
so here, I'm going to establish connection to my existing data sources. Same thing what is coming from Workspace and your planning as well as Essbase application. So I'm going to select Essbase. This is live. So I'm going to select my cube and app. So now you get your default grid. So I can, just like any other application, I can do, like just like other SmartView versions, I could type in all your office things are available there. You could zoom into all levels, or let's say go next level for now.
And you'll notice that it's a little bit of a different interface with the panel on the right side and everything too. So we're taking opportunities to really do a lot of enhancement of the presentation, being more modern with how Microsoft designs their interfaces and other things there. So you'll kind of notice how that changes a bit.
I did pivot that, just like.
Can you pivot the panel?
It takes up a lot of real estate.
Oh yeah, you could actually. That is something that we decided that you can park them aside. You can just close them, bring them back. So you have an options panel coming in here. You use those options, then give them off, and take them off basically. So that's how it's going to be. We are actually redesigning UI in a certain way that you get more real estate for you to work with. Yeah. So yeah, your existing member selection. So we are rewriting member selection.
So So you'll have the better member selector. You can do searches within there. You can, go ahead and step through, much nicer. So again, this is still all in development, active development. So you'll see more refinements here and other things. And definitely when we start to roll it out or do other things, feedback is always welcome on that. But
So with SmartView, actually that's a very, very good question.
Repeat the question.
So the question is that is that going to be only for on-prem or for the cloud also, right? Yeah. So it doesn't matter to SmartView. Basically, it's going to work in both cases. So this particular application is going to run on a server. It can run on a cloud version or it can run on your on-prem as an add-on into it. So when we talk about the anatomy, we are going to go about the architecture of how the whole thing is built. Then it's going to be a little bit more clear to you.
yeah.
So in short, it's going to work on both.
Yeah, we'll have to start moving. 'Cause we've got like 10 more. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah. So basically, you could do submit ranges, etc. You have options to change the color. One thing what we have added here is that now you have a dimension header. If you have a bunch of members on your grid, then you don't know what dimension that is coming from. We added a way as based on a request from some customers regarding that. Now it's going to remain there. Things like that. So that's one.
So,
Yeah.
yep. Okay. All right, we're going to swap back over here so we can get through some more slides here. So, thanks Shaji for through that. Sorry for the screen switch, but we didn't have a switch box, so it was the best way to kind of go through and do that. Okay. So as we mentioned, this will be a single add-in when we develop it. It really works across all those environments. Probably what you're going to see is it will kind of come in phases, right? Because the applications have a lot of complexity with their form support, rules, all these other things that they have, where just doing ad hoc actions, for example, against Essbase is simpler. There's a defined set of functionality you need there. So we'll start to see that. We're actually releasing a version of this, I believe, at the end of this year for Apple, who's really going through, and as we mentioned, we're working closely with them on this too. So they're giving us a lot of feedback on usability. I can't think of a better company to work with usability feedback than Apple as well, right? So that's really good, and that's why we're seeing kind of this collapsible stuff and getting at those options directly there versus having pop-ups and all those other things we do with the on-prem is providing a much more seamless activity there. So I don't know if you want to talk through this anatomy of a web add-in real quick. Yep.
I think it's not projecting that somehow.
Oh, is it not projecting?
So primarily a web
try that
add-in.
again.
There is a question in there?
Yep.
You said you're going to release it by the end of the year for Apple and for Windows.
So this is actually this is the same code that will work on Mac, on your browser, on your iPad. So pretty much once this is available, you can start your or you can finish your work or leave your work halfway at your office PC, go home and continue the work iPad, and and send your document to your boss who may be using a Mac. Then he can continue finishing up that document. Okay. So each of the document contains a bit of information about where that add-in came from. So there is no explicit install required for them. So it will pull the right bits and continue work from them.
Yeah, I think the question though is when will we release to other clients? I mean, we're going to start with Apple first. This is one of those where, once we get kind of that validation, because it is kind of this big rewrite and everything else, look for this. It'll probably be sometime, hopefully early 2018, you're going to start to see it, for, again, defined set of functionality to start, and then we'll continue to roll it out to additional ones. We have like 15 minutes, so let's go. Yeah.
So this one is actually a high-level architecture of any web add-in. Basically, you have a JavaScript, and you have a manifest file that controls the behavior of that, right? So that's exactly how we have done that. If we could switch to the next one.
Yep.
So here, in this case, you can see that we have all the existing SmartView providers. It could be a cloud version or an on-prem. Then an add-on to that is going to be like a JavaScript from Office, then SmartView JavaScript, etc., building this logic and rendering that as web add-in. Okay, so with the manifest file, that's how it's done. So your existing providers with an added web server, application running on top of it, JavaScript, and a manifest will give you support for on all platforms. Same code. So with the manifest, you can control what gets into each of these users. If you have an accounting team wanted a different ribbon than your procurement team, as an end user, you can configure them. You can even configure your buttons, what shows up, or your icons, how it shows up, name of the button, etc. It gives you that level of flexibility to customize it. And we'll also touch upon the deployment, how easy that's going to be. Yeah.
Yep.
Just a quick little stupid thing. Is it going to say SmartView 365 on the ribbon?
We have not decided on any of the names, so Al is going to be the one who will.
Yeah, we haven't yet, but we do realize that a customer may be running both for a time being, right? Because it won't be fully supported, so we don't want you to have to keep going to disable and then re-enable the other one. So we'll come up with some way to differentiate if a customer wants to run both of them, but I don't know if it'll say 365. It's just a placeholder now for us. So. The nice thing here, and again, I know we're coming up on 15 minutes. We got a lot of things to get through, so I won't spend a lot. These slides will be up there. But the key thing here is the deployment in the cloud. So think about your user group. Now, your finance people, they still may want that desktop version of Office, and that's fine. This add-in could get deployed to them within there. But the ones that are running in the cloud, you administer that, you post it in there, and all those users then consume it. So you're not going through a desktop kind of distribution and other things. So now it makes it much easier to maintain. And some companies look at that. For the people that only touch Office periodically, they want them to have that web subscription. It's more cost effective than buying all these desktop versions. So as we mentioned, it really goes across all of that. So you literally will be able to run it on your iPad and connect to a source and go. So as we mentioned here, you have the capabilities within here. You have that centralized deployment, and we have to work within that whole framework that Office has. Now, the difference of this versus an add-in for Google, because we've also kind of looked at Google Sheets and what we can do there. The difference there is that add-in actually runs on Google servers. So if you work with Google Sheets, unless you're running in their private kind of deployment, your data is kind of passing through there,
that's
right? That's the only way it operates. Where like with Office, it's running within that browser, so you're staying within your firewall. Your data's not going out in the ether when it's rendering to you in Office 365 within your browser, right? So this is still, I wanted to just address the Google Office topic because we do get customers asking us that, and those are some things just to be aware of, which is why we're continuing to focus on that. And Office definitely has more functionality. Google still is extending their sheets for what we would need to do in there. Microsoft has been much more collaborative as we've been going through the process. So, okay. I'm going to skip through these, right? You'll have these slides if you're really interested in technology, what the items are, the deployment, how you go and do it. All these slides are in here for you to look at because we want to get to some tips and tricks here. So
All I want to say is that, if you have dealt with it, no more MSIs in this one, okay? So it should make you happy.
Yeah. Yeah. So from the standpoint of coming into some tips and tricks, some performance, so, the functions, as much as we've tried to optimize HS gets, I mean, they're individual cell formulas, right? If you're doing a 10 by 10, a 50 by 50 grid, and you have HS gets everywhere, ultimately they're individual formulas. We've done a lot to try and batch that up to really look at that and go, oh, this is all coming from the same place, so I'm just going to go issue that query one time and go get all the data I need and then put it back into the grid, right? But we can't guarantee that it's always going to, that'll happen every time. I mean, there's still instances, when HS-GET first was out there and we had that in SmartView, people were doing these, and literally it was issuing 100, if it was a 10 by 10, they were individually 100 queries going to your source. And that's why it took long to render. You could literally see it building each cell when it goes across, where like ad hoc grids tend to be, I'm sorry, I hit the button. Ad hoc grids tend to be, it goes and gets that grid all at one time. So HFM, we know people don't all build the ad hoc forms. That capability is there. They've added that capability within there so that we can, be more efficient at getting the data. But it's just, what you're going to see with HS-GETs. We'll do, we continue to look at that, everything we can, but at some point, it's as far as we can go. And then we're going to talk about some of these other items here. So, for metadata and storage, there's a couple of things under the Essbase options. So you can reduce the Excel file size. So there is a compression capability there that kind of compresses the stored metadata. And this improved metadata options, leave this checked unless you're a sharing document with really old SmartView versions, right? And so you don't really want to, uncheck that unless you really need to go and say, well, somebody's on, I don't know what really old means, how far back?
7.2 or,
yeah.
9.0 kind of. Like
9.0, which I don't even think is supported anymore. So, basically, those are things you don't really need to worry about playing around with to see if it changes your performance. You actually want to just leave it checked. Deleting metadata, what does that one do, Shaji?
So delete metadata is that, we do save functions, all the data value what you retrieve for an HS-GET val need to be stored somewhere because Excel will make a call to a function and we need to provide that last value to it. So those kind of value get saved into your Excel sheet in a hidden form that you don't see outside. So you could clean that up by deleting a metadata. So same state with the POV. If you have a large number of members on your point of view, that gets pushed or get into the sheet metadata as well. So if your spreadsheet gets extremely large or something like that, that's an option that you could consider. You can just delete it and clean that up. So a couple of things to note there. One, your function values will be lost. Second one is that your current selection of point of view will be lost. Third one is that anywhere you are connecting to last, that would also be lost. Any metadata on the sheet would be lost in those cases.
So for example, though, if you were doing a lot of testing, you're going through there, and then you're going to distribute this workbook, you probably want to clean it up before you distribute it. Otherwise, all that's going to be in there. So it's just something, again, as you're using it, yes.
Thinking about undo features, will you address the fact that when you undo the Essbase formulas keep on disappearing?
So actually, that may be we actually need to take a look at that. I don't think that's an issue. So one of the situations that I've seen that formula disappear is that very last one. Basically, you have 5 undos. Okay, so you have done all that. Now it goes back to the sheet where it opened up. Now, like the very first state, we can't undo to that level. Everywhere else, it should actually stay there. We can take a look.
Yeah,
at that.
drop us give us your name or your card or something. We'll definitely take a look and see that. But the undos. If you don't normally need to have like 10 undos or things like that, because again, it's capturing and it's got to retain all that information when you're going through. So obviously there's overhead associated with that. So.
Like a clear undo, because we have some users that like to set it really high.
Yep.
And it impacts their machine. So if there was a clear cache, just a button that, so as they're working, they can say,
Very good concept, yeah.
my machine's running slow, I want to clear these things.
Yeah.
It just frees up some memory.
Yeah.
We could do that. We can consider that.
We can look at that. Yeah, absolutely.
Also, we did another little functionality that if the Excel has 2 versions, right? 32-bit and 64-bit. So now Excel 32-bit has a 2 gig memory limitation. So as and when you work on it, and if the memory increases beyond, let's say, 1.5 M, then there's a chance that Excel can shut down abruptly. So we started to show a message right now saying that you are crossing that limit on a 32-bit, save your work. So that's something that you'll actually see coming in, yeah. It actually, it's in the product, you should.
Yep. Okay, again, that, you know, if you need these things, you're obviously not going to uncheck them, you're not going to turn them off, but if you just always leave them on and you're doing stuff, just, you know, again, remember, it's just overhead that SmartView has to check. If you're expecting, I don't know why this keeps jumping forward on me, uncheck move formatting, so for example, retain numeric formatting, if these are things that you're not really doing within the query that you need to change, you know, you can disable them. The logging and diagnostics, it's great to just track stuff initially when you're going through, or if you need to do a reproducible case to send to us. But, you know, again, if you have it on all the time, it's taking up space, it's taking up overhead. You know, even for us, we get lots of extensions that we test and we do things with. We try to make sure, like, SmartView plays nice with every extension out there. We do see from time to time where we have an issue with some of those, but, you know, again, if you don't have extensions that you use on a regular basis, or they're just kind of still there from a long time ago, moving those off or disabling those within the Excel options is always a good thing to do. And, you know, your workbook size. So some people like to create the mega of everything in a workbook, even if 3 or 4 sheets are the ones they use the most, but then they got all these other sheets that they've just had forever. You know, again, just you know, be aware that on top of what we're doing with the undos and all these other things that are taking up memory and taking up resources, you're also going to have those additional sheets that are kind of sitting there that aren't needed, also taking up memory and footprint there. You know, from a planning, there's obviously some, you know, tips that you could try or areas to look at from your planning forms that you do. So, you know, if you have the spreading turned on and you don't use that, you know, these are things that, you know, you may or may not want to consider. But, you know, the spreading, it's not great with really huge grids that you have brought in. So, you know, be aware of that. The suppress options, you know, that helps reduce the size being brought to the client. So, you know, when we issue the query and it goes over there, it'll address that before it sends the grid back. So take a look at your suppress options. Don't bring everything back and then decide I'm going to go toggle off and suppress missing or something else. And, you know, the pages, geez. The pages are, you know, I did this happened to Gabby on Sunday, and I thought he was crazy that his slides were jumping on him, and now mine are doing the same thing. You know, the planning forms, things like that on the members up there. We talked about the ad hoc options. You have those available to you, you know, the preserve formulas and comments. You know, some of these different things that are there that have been introduced into SmartView, but, you know, not everybody uses them on every query or every workbook or every set of analytics they're doing. So these are things that, you know, you can be aware of that do additional things. So the formula fill, it obviously takes up processing on the server side, and then we also have to do things on the client when we get it back to check, were there formulas here? If there were, now I got to go replicate them or formula fill and things like that. So even if you don't have formulas, we still got to interrogate the sheet to look at it if this is checked. So that, you know, that's just a comment there that you may want to look at that or not within there. So, okay. You know, we talked about from SmartView standpoint, you know, as Shaji mentions, Microsoft updates Office regularly. We do see Patch Tuesdays, other fixes that they do. So as he mentions, you know, we'll get those patches. Sometimes we have access to them ahead of time. We try to make sure that there's no collisions with what we're doing. If we see something, you report something, we get on the phone right away with SmartView or with the Office folks, and we work through it, and then they'll help diagnose it. Sometimes they tell us, oh, there's a, you know, registry setting or there's something here, and then we try to work around that within our code, because you're obviously not going to tell users to go into their registry and start messing around with settings. So we try to do those items within there. SmartView staying near the latest. Disabled add-ins, you know, again, COM add-ins, Excel add-ins, all these things you may have out there. Just, you know, disable the ones that you don't use on a regular basis, that you don't use very often. It just makes it easier. Shaji mentioned Office 32 versus 64. You know, 32-bit, we're bound by 2 gig limit anyways on memory. So, you know, the ones you start to do a lot of, there's kind of a max in just, you know, one sheet, one ad hoc. We do about 1.2 million cells, basically starts to fill that memory up, right? So that's kind of, if you're doing a lot there, you probably need to start looking at 64-bit Office if you're really starting to work with a lot. Okay. We do, when you install it, you should really uninstall, it doesn't really do an install over. The best thing is just to uninstall the old one and then install the new one. Works the best. And if you want a web launch, we mentioned about Chrome coming soon, but if you use Firefox, there is an option there to launch from within Firefox as well. Okay.
So this is one point I wanted to make. People talk about classic add and established connection. Every document that you save with SmartView, it remembers where it brought the data back. All you need to do is just go click refresh. It will know where it is and it will establish connection if it need to. So it's as simple as that. Be it a Word document or Excel document, you establish connection once and it will remember it.
Okay. Yep, the MRU list, that's really nice on the right side because when you click on it, it'll just connect you directly to that source. You kind of don't have to go through this, go navigate the hierarchy to find something. So again, if you work on it, your users are doing some of the same things over and over. I think they could pin those as well, things that they do. So they could just have that right there. They don't have to go to the connect or the private connection. They could just connect directly and go through it. Visualize in Excel. Some of these different features that are here within, very useful. From a VBA perspective, you want to talk about the VBA?
So what VBA, there are two types of things what we do, right? One is you can extend the functionality of existing one. Second one is that if you wanted something like a classic add-in behavior, then we expose that as a VBA. We do not want to expose or as a UI to the entire world because they might get into trouble because if you submit all cells, that may not be what a user wanted, right? Things like that. So we expose a VBA equivalent in those worlds. I was planning to demo another one, but we are running out of time. You can mimic classic add-in. You can select a range and do a retrieve just for those ranges. You could modify some value and submit only those ranges back. You can submit a data value, but do not refresh the grid. We do have VBA to customize up to that level. And with the classic add-in behavior, if you wanted, you could get that done within like 2 or 3 VBAs. With the list applications, connect, etc., the classic add-in, the entire classic add-in can be done. Again, behind the scenes, we are using exact same API that classic add-in is using. Grid APIs for SmartView as well as classic add-in. We changed it in 11.1.102, long back. So it's you should see the same performance. You should see the grid behaving that way. We also introduced another one you can preserve the formula but not the comments. It'll show the comments one after the other. So that's another option added as well. So a lot of additions in the VBA world as well.
So the customized ribbons, again, you can do this here. You need to be on Office 2010 and up, so you can go ahead and do those and then distribute those to the different users, or you could set them up for different groups, as Shaji mentioned. Maybe your finance team wants a different view than maybe people that interact less often with SmartView, and you just want to hide certain things for them. Feedback and diagnostics, this is really good for us as well to capture information in there. But it doesn't capture any sensitive information. So if you really, are concerned or something else, we don't really care what data's on a sheet. We just care about the size, the shape of what's going on, performance, other things that are hitting it. We're not getting, detailed grids and other things there. And you also may hear us, if we talk to you, say, can you do a Fiddler trace? So Fiddler is just a free third-party application you install, and it really just tracks those requests and responses, coming through there so that we can see what's going on, because sometimes it may be a provider issue, there may be something going on in the network. So this really helps us diagnose, SmartView issues you may have. So those are 2 items we have. And within here, and again, I'm going to, give me about 20 minutes after we leave here. I'll post this up to Kscope to update the one that's there with these tips and tricks updates. But we have a lot of information here for the performance and memory considerations. It's a nice white paper we had put together, actually after a meeting last year with the Kscope folks. So we, keep that up to date using diagnostics, tips and tricks. So all this stuff will be, available to you. You can go ahead and get that additional information if you like. So hopefully this was useful for all of you. We're really excited about the Office 365 work we're doing, not only just because it'll make a lot of people's lives much easier, but it also really enhances the usability and flow that users will take through the product. So, yes? Yeah, so the question is with PBCS, the dashboards, the cards, clusters, other things like that coming into SmartView. So yeah, part of, we will be looking at, so in not only just the cards and clusters that are there through the UI, but also what we're doing to expand that as part of the integrated business processes, we will be looking to expand and bring those into SmartView. It's a challenge, right? Everybody wants you to replicate, for a while there, you try to replicate in the web what Excel does, and then you go beyond that in the web, and everybody wants that back in Excel as well. We will look at doing some of the dashboards and stuff, but we're not trying to make SmartView a complete replacement for everything you can do on the web. So we're kind of going into that and looking at the items, but the biggest one is to take advantage of some of that easy usability you have on the web to navigate across, so the cards and other things versus just the task lists and things that people have today, because they're using those instead of task lists. They have the tab sheets or forms within there, and that's something we want to expose within here for sure. So, okay.